Welcome and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our first ever MPHR panel webinar covering empowering women in the workplace, changing the face of leadership. Just a few housekeeping issues before we get started here today. If you would like to submit a question during the program, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. We will be sending out the recording of the webinar later today along with the slides. I'm thrilled to introduce your moderator for today's panel, MPHR's very own Vice President of Marketing, Rachel Weeks.
Thank you so much, Katie. Hi, everybody. Welcome to all of our attendees. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to be here with all of you today, recognizing Women's History Month and last week's International Women's Day. As Katie said, I'm Rachel Weeks, and I'm Vice President of Marketing at MPHR. We make a full suite of HCM software, including payroll, time, performance management, learning and development, and more. We could go to the next slide, as well as HR and recruiting services to complement and extend your company's HR function. On the next slide, we show how we work with more than 1,500 clients and companies across all different industries and across the US. And I've had the pleasure of working at MP for about 9 months, and so I'm thrilled to be hosting today's webinar. Women make up 47% of the US workforce, yet they hold only 28% of top executive positions. And while we continue to make significant strides in challenging traditional norms and redefining the concept of leadership, sometimes we feel as if we're alone in this journey. I'm joined today by 3 amazing women, all accomplished leaders who will share their personal journeys, highlighting triumphs over adversity and the lessons that they've learned along the way. One thing that we all have in common is that we all work in the HR field, as we know many of you listening in on today's webinar do as well. I've led marketing teams in HR tech companies for more than 10 years, while our guests have worked with and as HR professionals for most of their careers as well. We also all feel very strongly about the importance of working in mission-driven companies with values-based cultures, and have many stories about how these types of organizations can have a significant positive impact and the sometimes negative experiences with those companies that don't. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce have each of our panelists introduce herself, her company, and her role. Let's start with Regina McNally.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I am thrilled to be here today. I work for an organization called Tribute Home Care. We are headquartered in Massachusetts, and we operate out of 4 states in the Northeast. And it is the best company ever. I've been with them for 3.5 years, and I run our HR function, which we call People and Culture. We're a mighty team of 4. So before that, I worked in financial services for almost 20 years. So a big shift for me, but thrilled to be in home care. And fun fact about me, I love to travel. I'm trying to get to as many countries and states as I can, and just got back last night from a little weekend trip to South Carolina, crossing another state off my bucket list.
Congratulations, how exciting. Thank you, Regina. Now let's go to Laura Ahern.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me today. Laura Ahern, Vice President of Sales here at One Digital. One Digital is the leading insurance and financial services consulting firm. At One Digital, we like to say that we show up as fierce advocates for our clients, ready to help businesses and individuals achieve their aspirations for health, success, and financial security. We employ over 4,000 employees nationwide with over 200 offices. And I will say that a fun fact, and I love that Regina loves to travel, because recently my husband and I also love to travel. He's a police officer that will retire in the near future. And we just invested in our own franchise, opening up a small travel agency called Ahern Dream Vacations. So give us a call.
I will.
Congratulations. Thanks, Laura. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
Michelle Strasburger, welcome.
Thank you. Congratulations, Laura. That is very exciting.
Thanks.
I am Michelle Strasburger. I'm the CEO of the Wellness Value. And I founded the Wellness Value because I've worked for both great companies and toxic companies. And so I have a goal of making the world of work a happier and healthier place. I'm an HR consultant and fractional CHRO. And a fun fact about me is I live very close to the border of Canada. So I like to joke that I'm almost Canadian, and my family enjoys the snow, which we got a foot of this weekend. And Secretly, I'm a homesteader, so we've got a bunch of chickens that my son takes care of. So it's his little farm.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you so much, Michelle, and thanks once again to everyone for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So let's get started. Challenges, something we've all faced throughout our careers, and everyone does, and how we've tried to overcome them. One challenge that we can all relate to is work-life balance and what that means at different stages of life and different stages of career. Laura, will you get us started in talking about how you address those challenges?
I certainly can. You know, when we originally had this conversation, I had to think back quite a long ago. So when early on in my career, I got married. I had two beautiful daughters. My husband just got into the police force, and he had to take that schedule that was given to him. So he would work the midnight shift, midnight to 8 a.m., while I worked the day shift, 9 to 5, trading off, taking care of our girls, which I would not trade for anything. We tried to squeeze in dinner, then off to bed he went. And while I took baths and the bed routine, he took the day shift and took care of them all during the day. And while we did this for over 15 years so that we could be there for our kids and not have to pay for that additional cost of daycare. However, it took lots of sacrifice and time with each other as a husband and wife, and while trying to spend that quality time with our kids before they went off to bed or on the weekends. So now, fast forward, my oldest Jessica just graduated from college. She's back home, and I've settled in with my routine, working late, entertaining clients 3 or 4 nights a week. And now she's questioning me, like, what? You're out again? What time will you be home? Things like that. And which I was kind of taken a little bit aback by, thinking, well, she's older. But I guess what I'm trying to say, that it's amazing that even as our children get older, I still feel that pressure and that guilt that I'm not giving enough time to what really matters most. And even after 30 years of working full time, I'm still trying to juggle that work family life balance. Do you ladies feel the same?
And now,
Absolutely. My challenge is I have young children. So my oldest is 13 and my youngest is 7. And so we were in a similar situation, but during the pandemic. So I think there's a lot of parents out there on this call that can empathize with that or understand. It was very challenging. I did learn that I'm not a teacher through that process, like many people. But we had facilities that were still open and operating while our corporate office worked remotely. And so I felt like I was on all the time. And as a woman, I also felt like I had to show up more to be seen. And I'm sure a lot of women can experience that, where there were times where I'd be on calls with my CEO consistently, and my kids were either working on school, remote learning, or my youngest was 4, so he was on the Xbox while I was doing this. And then my CEO would say, oh, I haven't seen you respond to these things, or are you really working, or are you babysitting your kids at home? And I was on calls with them all day. And so when we talk about empowering women, I think it's important in the workforce that we are saving space, because women tend to be the ones that are the caregivers and do a lot of those things. And so we need to make space for work-life balance, no matter what that looks like. And we have to figure out what that looks like for everybody individually, because it's different.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think another thing to add to that too is when we are moving through our careers and we're looking at women who have come before us, and we're thinking, okay, what made them successful? Sometimes what made them successful isn't what's going to make us successful, and trying to emulate what we've seen ahead of us doesn't always work. So I think thinking about, okay, there's a woman that was really successful and I want to be successful, but maybe that person's not my role model. So finding your own path along the way and saying, what are the good things that I want to take from the women that have come ahead of me, and how am I going to emulate that? And then how am I going to let the other pieces go? And I think that's been something that I have worked on my entire career, is trying to figure out how can you be a strong woman in the workplace and take those lessons that work for you and let the other pieces go so that you can make those choices of what that balance looks like for you. It doesn't have to look just like another woman. It can be unique to yourself.
Yeah, I think what's really important to remember about that specifically, Regina, is none of us necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes of what we see with anyone, whether it's a woman leader, or, you know, anyone. We don't know what kind of support system they have. We don't know what kind of challenges they might have, whether it's caring for young children, caring for older parents, you know, factors based on where you live. So it's hard and unnecessary to really compare yourself to the accomplishments or the position of another woman, because you don't know what it took for her to get there and what it takes for her to get there every single day. You need to focus on what it takes for you to get where you want to go every single day based on the support system that you have. Like Laura said, you know, the trade-offs that she made with her husband, you know, whereas, you know, other people either don't have the flexibility to make that choice, or they just don't choose to make that choice and do it a different way. And that's how all of our paths are very different.
Agreed. And I think success for each person looks a little bit different too. So for myself, when I left financial services and moved into a completely different industry, I made a conscious choice to choose an organization that was mission driven. And so success for me was something where I needed that purpose along with being able to support my family and feel like I was continuing to grow in my career. And so I think really being conscious about what is success for you so that you're chasing the right dream. And I think that that aligns with my leadership style as well, which is purpose driven. So really putting purpose and people in front of profit. Profit will follow, just like I'm still making a living, but really making that choice to say, I'm choosing to focus on purpose, and I'm choosing to work for an organization that's aligned with my goals, my values. And then that makes me a more natural leader in my space.
Yeah, and I think we're so lucky. I mean, you, Laura, and I all work in organizations that support that culture. Michelle, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you left corporate culture to chase your dream, and, you know, how that sets you up a little bit differently maybe from the three of us in terms of accomplishing your goals.
Sure. So I just want to touch on Regina's point there. I think that is a well-made point. I also think it's something that we learn as we move through our career, right? What we really want and how to get there. And then more confidence, maybe we can call it confidence, to stand up for and go after the things we want. And so I think as women leaders, right, we have an opportunity to help other women that are new to the organization, new to their careers, to help bring them up. I think a lot of times women tend to get competitive with each other and prevent that. And I know we've all had different stories or experiences in that area. And I think we have to be conscious of helping women grow and develop and help them see what their careers are, and also standing up for them as well. So my experience, so I left corporate America during the pandemic. So you heard part of my story. The other part was I decided at one point something has to give and it can't be my kids. And so I left with a goal of living more intentionally. And what I've been able to do, and this took me a lot of time and I'm not good at it, I'm getting better every day, but is just set boundaries and reinforce those boundaries. And so I tend to bookend my meetings between 9 and 2 because the kids are in school. And then I have the opportunity after school to be with them. And so I reinforce that all the time. And I think that's huge for women. It's so easy for us to say, and I'm this way, say, yes, I'll do it. No matter what, I'll do it. Because it gives us exposure. It helps us grow. It adds value to our resume. But what are you giving up? And that, I think I learned that hard lesson. A few of my friends went through the same thing. And I don't know if it was because we were all 40 and that had something to do with it because it was the year I turned 40. Or if it was just that whatever was going on in the world, we decided like this is enough and we need to start setting boundaries and helping ourselves. Because if you don't, you end up going into burnout, which is very common in HR. I think the statistic still is 98% of HR professionals are struggling from burnout. And I think that's one of the things is we just get inundated and we're not setting boundaries.
I think that's a really good point, Michelle, because I think as leaders, we think we have to say yes to everything. And I have a mentor that I've had for a long time, and he gave me some advice. And sometimes you can say no. It's okay to say no. That what, I just can't take this on anymore. Um, a few years back, I was personally asked to give a presentation similar to a TED Talk at our annual conference. And I said yes, and didn't realize, oh my God, what the heck did I say yes to? One Digital asked me to give a live presentation on stage to thousands of my coworkers. I'm not talking hundreds, I'm talking thousands, about the trials and tribulations that I faced personally and professionally throughout my career. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, I can do this, but I was shaking in my boots. Now, obviously, you think you've been in this business for a long time. I will say it took months of practice, coaching, a lot of sleepless nights to prepare for that presentation. But in essence, I got through it. And I have to say, it was one of the most rewarding experiences that I have had throughout my career. Now, my point is, by taking chances on yourself, you're going to demonstrate self-trust and give you that ambition to succeed. And both of which I honestly, both of which I can promise you, it will set you up for a future success in the future for sure.
I think if I tack onto that, I think part of what you were sharing, you have to be able to be vulnerable, and you have to be able to share what it is you're going through and what your fears are in order to overcome them. And one of the things I think women historically have been taught is that you don't show that fear, you don't show that vulnerability, because that's sort of your feminine side, and you want to keep that inside. And I remember many years ago in my career being told by a female manager that I needed to be a swan. And what she meant by that was, she said, you can have all kinds of terrible, stressful things going on in your life. You can be burning out, you can be blowing up, but keep that under the surface of the water where no one can see it. Be a swan, be graceful all the time, be calm and peaceful, and show that you have everything in control. And at the time, I thought, boy, this is a successful woman. I guess she knows what she's talking about. But I would say now, looking back, that was one of the worst pieces of advice that I ever received, because that's not possible and it's not genuine. And sure, there are times when you need to hold it all together, and you want to be professional. But if you're not able to be vulnerable, if you're not able to ask for help or share what you're going through, you're not going to grow. And as a leader in this space, when I think about the women who report to me, if I'm not vulnerable with them, if I'm not open and share the challenges that I'm going through or have gone through, they're not going to share with me. Why would they trust me to share with me? And how am I able to coach them and help them along their path as well? So I think a lot of this says we have to shift our mindset on this. We have to be willing to be vulnerable and know when it's okay to be open and share our challenges, because otherwise people can't read our minds. People aren't going to know when we need help, and they're not going to be able to offer us advice.
I think that's huge. And I think that the authenticity and sharing your story with others helps open that door. And, my young career, I looked up to the EVP of HR, who's a strong woman, and she always had the game face on. And so from an early age, I had that perception that women are supposed to be strong and be the swan. And I remember I was at a leadership development program that I had created in France. And it was the first time I traveled after my son was born. And everybody had to give presentations, and they said you had to say who you are and what you do and some fun information, similar to what we did earlier. And my son was 7 months old. It was my first trip after he was born. And I got up and I said, I'm Michelle Strasburger. And I said, I'm a mom. And I think it was the first time I ever said it publicly. And I started crying, and then I was mortified that I was crying. So I started crying more, and then I got like the hiccups with it. And one of my coworkers said, it's okay, Michelle, it's okay if you cry. It lets us know you have a heart, which made me laugh and made everybody else laugh. And it just kind of helped temper the room. But it could have gone a lot worse if somebody was like, well, she can't make it because she's crying. And I think emotions are not optional, and allowing people to have emotions at work and share your emotions, like Regina said, I think is really powerful, especially for women in the workplace.
You've all made such great points about, what we're challenged with every day as leaders, as women, as just professionals in general, and the importance, and the balance of both confidence and resilience. And I think that, being vulnerable and allowing that to support the ability to be resilient is really new in many corporate cultures. Depends on your industry, depends on, what size company you work with. Can we talk a little bit about, Michelle, some of the different company cultures that you've experienced and, the positives and the negatives about some of the things that we're talking about that have helped you, build confidence and resilience in your career?
Sure. So I heard a definition a couple of weeks ago for resilience, and I wrote it on my chalkboard because it was really powerful. And it was, resilience is not the ability to bounce back, but your ability to bounce forward. And I think that, like, if you can hold on to something, that's really good, because I've had, like I said, I've had really great experiences with good cultures, and that's why I think I'm so driven towards people first, mission driven culture companies. But I did have an experience where my boss was a bully. And we're seeing more legislation coming out around toxic workplaces, which I'm thrilled about. But having an environment like that creates such an issue with mental health for folks, and you can carry it with you. So I had a boss who would, we would get up to do a presentation together, and he would publicly humiliate me and say things like, "Oh, Michelle doesn't agree with this, so I'm just going to take over." And he would do the whole presentation, even though we were supposed to do it together. He would call me and swear at me at all hours, even after work, and berate me. And, those were a few of the examples. And when I finally left the organization, it took me a good 6 months to get my feet back under me. And so I know there are women on this call that can relate to that it may be a boss, it may be a peer. Just know, like, you can move on, and you can bounce forward, like the resilience thing I said. It just may take some time, and lean on others to help get you there. I had my new CEO at my next company could see that I was struggling, and said, "What happened?" And I was able to open up with him, and he just gave me that confidence and started to build that trust right away, which helped me, I think, overcome some of that. It affected my confidence. It affected how I showed up at work. It affected my sleep, my stress, all of those things. And so I don't think we think about that enough, about how much the work environment plays into your well-being. And it's really important that we do that and we think about that. And you can get away from it, and you can be better, and you can move on.
What's important to note about that too is, Michelle's bully boss was a man. My bully boss was a woman. And so it can come, from either direction. And it's the behavior and the diminishing. And just like you said, I had no confidence when I lost that job. When I left that job, I forgot what I was good at, and it was really difficult to overcome. But I've learned lessons about myself and about resilience that, I won't be in that situation, ever again, nor will I allow a situation like that to exist if I'm aware of it, in any organization or any culture, because it's just not okay.
Right.
Rachel,
one other thing that, if I can add to that, just to give you the proven point, when I was working at that company, my doctor told me I was perimenopausal. Which is a whole nother webinar. We'll talk about women's health issues. But, and when I left that organization, and told me I would never have kids again, and I left that organization, and a year later I got pregnant. So it plays, like, it's a huge impact on your health.
I was gonna sort of add to that and say, bullies are one thing. I think in general, feedback is something that changes over the lifespan of a person's career, and the way that you absorb feedback, and the way that you give feedback changes. And so, at least for me, when I was younger in my career, and I shared the example of the swan, I took feedback very seriously, and also not in a way where I was able to analyze it well. And so I assumed that if someone was telling me something about myself, it had to be true. And I can remember very early in my career being told by a woman that I wasn't a good writer. And so I just absorbed that and accepted that. I'm not a good writer. So I avoided situations where I felt like I had to do a lot of writing because I wasn't a good writer. And it has taken me pretty far into my career to sort of challenge that question, to the point where my boss now, even last week, said, you're a great writer. I look to you to do writing. And I told him the story, and I said, that's funny because I received feedback very early in my career that I wasn't, and I just absorbed that. And so I think as we move into our career, it's really important for us to be good at pulling apart feedback. We still desperately need it. And I think the further we get in our career, the less likely that we're going to get feedback from multiple sources. So finding ways to continue to get feedback is critical, but learning how to pull that apart and really take what you need and let the rest go is a skill set that needs to be developed in all of us. And then we take that and figure out, how do we give feedback to the people around us in a way that's constructive and kind, but they deserve that too, and they need that. So I think feedback is something that we can all get better at getting and giving, and hopefully not become bullies in the process.
Yeah, I think all of these experiences develop who we are as leaders too, over time. And I think one of the most important things is just to be self-aware, understand what your leadership style, your strengths, your weaknesses, and how to react to some of those challenges, and be cognizant of that. And I love what you said, Regina, because even now, I recently asked HR to have my team do a 360 assessment on me, because I want to learn the feedback of how I can become a better leader for them, and how I show up and support them. Um, I just think feedback is so important that sometimes it's not easy hearing constructive feedback. But I will say, throughout my career, anytime someone gave me constructive feedback, I would learn and develop the different management styles to develop myself in my own career through the future. So I would agree. I think feedback is really critical.
I think it's interesting how, we receive feedback in lots of different ways throughout our careers. And it's also it's the way it's delivered and also the way it's received. Regina talked about that one statement, "You're not a good writer," that stuck with her. And I bet we all have one of those, because I know that I do. I was going to pursue, this particular career path, and I was told that I wasn't the right fit for a reason that stuck with me, and I ended up not doing that, and so your words are very impactful. All of our words are very, very impactful. Changing gears a little bit, and it is related, to feedback and supporting those around us. Let's talk about how mentoring has impacted our careers, and how I know we all believe how important mentoring is, and some of the experiences that we've had with mentoring programs. Laura, I know at One Digital, you've got a formal program, which not all companies have, but that's the luxury of working at a bigger company sometimes. Maybe you can talk about that and some of your experiences.
Yeah, sure. So here at One Digital, I'm a leader as part of the Women's Initiative Network for Growth and Success. And through that program, we've built a mentorship program. And the goal of the program is really connecting peers from across the organization to foster connections and grow development. So the program is open to employees. That includes all genders. So it's not just for women. You can choose to be a mentor or a mentee or both. And we have excellent participation in this program from year to year. The ask is that the mentor and the mentee meet at least once a month for 6 months. And after that time, if they choose to continue their relationship, of course, we encourage that, but we leave it up to them. And the hope is that within 6 months, they'll make a positive impact on each other and the organization, but it will also strengthen its self-confidence, to participate and reflect self-examination, and also help navigate some career challenges. There's another program that I'm actually about to go to Atlanta in our headquarters and propose a new mentorship program. It's called Mentors in the Moment. So rather than have such a formal program, what I'm asking is that all leaders step up and check in with employees, pick a few once a month and just check in with employees and ask them, geez, how is it going within the organization? So it's not such a formalized program. So if you don't have the ability to provide a formalized program, think of it as more of a mentors in the minute program where leaders can just check in with employees across the organization.
That's fantastic. I love both of those opportunities because there isn't a one size fits all definition of what a
That's
mentoring
right.
program needs to look like. And I've also participated in the mentor-mentee type of relationship. And, it's different than what you might expect a traditional mentorship to be, but it's always enlightening. And, that's really the point, right, is to help more people understand each other so we can work together better. Michelle, I know you've been involved with some mentoring programs as well. You want to share that with us?
Sure. I mean, I've created some leadership development programs and some mentoring programs. I run a couple of different HR groups as well, which could be seen as a mentoring program called the HR Rebels. And I think it's just a really great opportunity for people to learn and grow. But I think the biggest impact that I've seen, kind of going again back to Regina's comment earlier in the discussion, is hearing from leaders and hearing their journeys, because not every journey is the same. And I think sometimes as leaders, we think we have to go a certain path to get to where we want to go, but we can move around the organization differently. And it gives people permission to make mistakes, because we've all made mistakes in our career, and sharing our stories kind of gives people the okay to be like, yeah, we're still human. But I think it's just really, really powerful.
Yeah,
Regina, you talked about that as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. I think, the same in my previous life, I had the honor of building and running some mentor programs. And I think, it was equally as powerful for me to be a mentee as to be a mentor. And I love what Laura was talking about as far as it doesn't have to be a long formal program. It can be, and I've been part of those, and those were fantastic, and I got so much out of them. But I love the idea of just getting what you need and having someone you can reach out to and trust, and ask a specific question that's related to a specific topic. And I think that kind of leads me to something that I was thinking about preparing for this, which is, I think one of the things that's so critical as we think about our space in leadership is that idea of being able to be trusted. And so Michelle just mentioned this too, but the idea of if you're someone that someone feels like they can pick up the phone and call and ask a tough question to, there's a couple things that are going to lead to that. One is they see you as someone who has been vulnerable in the past, has been willing to share their experience, and is likely to be willing to do that again. Somebody that they respect in the sense of the way that they've handled themselves, and somebody that they can trust to go to and talk about something that might be tough, that might be hard to admit, that might be challenging or confidential. And all it takes is one time for you to, share that story outside of that space in a place that maybe you shouldn't have, or, break that confidence. And it takes time to earn that kind of trust. It takes no time to lose that kind of trust. So I think one of those things that we teach in our leadership development programs is this idea of not spreading drama, of knowing when to keep it to yourself and to really be that trusted source, because that's something you can continue to build throughout your career. But again, you can lose it so quickly. But yeah, I think mentoring is amazing, both formal. We don't have formal programs at Tribute yet. We're working on that, but also informal. And I love what Michelle said about, or maybe it was Laura, sorry, about just picking up the phone and checking in on people. I love that. That's huge.
Yeah. We're all not lucky enough, and I recognize this throughout my career. I was lucky enough to have a mentor or a few mentors in my life, but going through this program that we're going through, I'm recognizing that a lot of people don't have mentors. So it's a wonderful way to either do a mentors in the moment program, so people, as leaders, we can start mentoring our peers, or develop a formalized program.
Yeah, I think what's also really important and worth mentioning is, we're talking about Women's History Month and International Women's Day as an acknowledgement of all the hard work women have gone through to get us, in the positions that we're in. But we recognize that we're all white women on this panel, which holds a certain privilege over others who have more challenges than, just their gender to overcome. Let's talk a little bit about strategies that, we can help others. Regina started, who are going through challenges that, maybe they're based on race or gender identity or other challenges that, we could help them overcome. I know, Michelle, you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, and it's similar to, we got a question too that is right in line with this. I can't speak from the seat of gender identity or race. I can speak from the seat of being a woman. And I think I've learned, again, through my career, I've learned that if nothing's going to change if you don't speak up, and that it takes a ton of courage to have that conversation. And sometimes we need help with help. We need other people to help us have that conversation, right? There may be somebody in the organization that has more clout that can bring up some challenge, maybe pay disparity. I know that came up in a question as well. How do you talk about pay disparity, right? For me, with some of the leaders I've had, because I've had really great relationships, I would go in and say, hey, there's an issue. Let's talk about it. But that comes from a seat of privilege, because I know a lot of people, women included, are afraid I'm going to lose my job and I have children at home and I can't stick my neck out there. And so is there somebody, an ally within the organization that can help you? Maybe it's somebody at the C-level that has more clout with, or a manager that has more clout with the C-level that can help carry the message for you, if you're not afraid to. I think in HR, it's part of who we have to be, is sticking our necks out there, but it's very hard to do, because sometimes those people that are the squeaky wheels get more of the eye rolls, like, oh, here she goes again. And so learning, I don't want to say learning to pick your battles, but, learning how to deliver feedback so that it's grounded and it's heard. And I had to have that conversation the other day with a client. They got really excited about hiring a salesperson who was great. But salespeople come with that opportunity to make money. And so they were throwing a ton of money at the person. The rest of the team were underrepresented folks. And I had to say to the CEO, do you see the optics here? And I wasn't attacking his decision and saying you shouldn't hire this white sales guy and give everybody else half the money that you're giving him and expecting them to participate in sales, because that creates inequalities. I said, I understand where you're coming from. I understand your intentions are good, because people, I assume, don't have bad intentions. But the optics you're creating can create a disparity. And it's a hard conversation to have. But as you start to build trust with leaders, that comes with time. And if you don't have that yet, linking arms with somebody else, I think, is helpful.
Yeah, I love that, Michelle. And I would say that it's our responsibility to really take the time to educate ourselves about DEI and B issues, including systematic biases, discrimination, barriers to inclusion. I mean, I take it upon myself to read books, articles, research papers, and seek diverse perspectives to deepen my understanding. I think, that's something that I take on myself, and I want to just listen and amplify marginalized voices. I think that's so important to just listen to others and understand their experiences and their perspectives.
Yeah, that gives us all a lot to think about, because these challenges are only going to continue to evolve as there is more representation, more acceptance, people gain more courage, and these conversations are, they're going to have to happen, because we will be prevalent in the workplace. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the things we talked about in our preparation is, do companies, do workplaces really, are they designed to support the needs of women? And, I think we can all, think back to, earlier in our careers, or, anyone even before COVID, everybody went into the office every day. Everybody had the same amount of hours. Maybe there were more traditional gender roles in terms of what was going on at home, and then, even the roles that were being held at work. But what are some of the things that we can identify as ways to help make our workplaces more female friendly, or just more, supportive in general to people's needs outside of the traditional, workday hours? Regina, I know you have some thoughts on that.
Sure, I can start out. I think, fortunately, I work for a CEO who is a great guy and very open to hearing about these kinds of challenges. And he uses me as a sounding board to make sure. So during COVID, we were remote, and as things were changing, we went out with multiple kinds of surveys to say, do you want to come back? Do you want a space to be able to come back to? What's working for you with being remote? And I think in my career previously, I had a lot of experience working remotely, because I had, for the most part, worked for managers that were supportive of that. And one of the things that I encourage people to do, if they're in a situation where that's not the norm, is to think about how can they come up with almost a pitch where there's something that's going to work for the company and work for them. So making it a multi-win to really come prepared. I think a lot of times we know what we want. And so maybe we get our gumption and we get our courage up and we can go and ask, which is a great step. But really coming prepared with sort of both the why this matters, but why there may be a win for the company. So for example, if, like Michelle was talking about, if you have a situation where you have certain childcare needs or something that you want to do, and maybe there's a way that also works best for your team, or there's a way that you can trade off with somebody on your team to make it so that there's always coverage. So you coming with a solution instead of expecting them to have the solution baked in for you. Or like for myself, I'm a morning person. My brain works better before a certain time of the day. So I know if there's certain types of meetings, I'm going to request to have them. And I'm just honest about that. Look, I'm better in the morning. This is when I'm going to shine. And so I think people don't feel like those things are going to matter, but if you work for a great person, or if you can come with that multi-win, you're going to be that much further ahead of the game than just saying, hey, can I stop working at certain time of day? Or, can I work from home? Come up with a why and maybe a multiple win if you can.
We've here at One Digital, I can't say that this happens all the time, but I promise you we try to delay our messages until the morning, because after 6 p.m. we try not to send messages out to the rest of the staff so everyone can enjoy their family when at home. Or even enjoy their own self-care if they're out working out, or we don't want them to worry about. Now, again, I can't say it happens all the time, but we try our hardest to delay those messages so that people can enjoy their home time. And again, it's just providing that flexibility. I think personally during COVID, we had a lot of empathy for people, right? Because it was that big change. And now it's 2024. And I will say, really just re-educating our leadership staff to continue that empathy, because it's still challenging and that empathy is important. I know, part of our leaders development is we're practicing empathy. So we're not just talking about empathy, we're practicing it as well.
That's so important, because, culture's driven from the top. And, words don't mean a whole lot if they're not followed up by actions and by behavior. And sure, COVID was certainly the instigator of so much drastic change to all of our lives and, our workplaces and, everything. But this is the way it is now. We only have the future to plan for and, to look ahead to every single day. So it kind of doesn't really matter. Although it seems like there's, a lot of people who obviously don't quite understand that. So we as leaders need to be vocal about remembering how we got to where we were and why, and all of the good things, that have really come out of it in terms of, our balance and our attention to self-care and wellness and family time and, so many things outside of the workplace. So thank you. All right, well, we're getting sort of close to the top of the hour, and we want to make sure that we leave a few moments for questions. I'd love to go around to each of you, with one question to start off. What advice would you give yourself today from when you first started in your career? Who'd like to go first?
I can go first. So, I would say you need to be proud of where you come from and what your story is. Be authentic, be curious and courageous. And I will say, I love this quote. And I did use this as part of my TED Talk, is you're stronger than you seem, braver than you believe, and smarter than you think you are.
I can go next.
We could all use those words, early in our careers and maybe every Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for me, it's as I've gotten further into my career and a little bit older, it's really about being intentional every day. And I find for me, I get up in the morning and I meditate every day, and I set an intention for the day. And I can't say that every day I follow through on that all the way, but it makes such a difference to start your day with purpose and to kind of not be driven by the minute you're waking up in the morning, having to check email and respond. And that was where I was, 20 years ago, just feeling like my day started and I was already behind. And I don't operate well that way. So I think, telling myself that it's okay to wake up in the morning and give yourself a moment to create some purpose and to create some boundaries and to have an intention for how you want your day to roll. And of course, things are going to come at you that you don't expect. But the more, I think, grounded that you are and centered, the better your day is going to be. And then each day leads from the next.
I would say for me, lean in with curiosity. It's been something that I've worked on, and also forgive yourself. Like, it's okay to say no. I think as women, we tend to beat ourselves up if we miss something or we made a mistake or if we had to say no to something. So, I think practicing self-forgiveness is really important.
Those are all really good bits of advice. That's certainly not only early in our careers, but, every day is a challenge, and every day we face, different opportunities to use our strengths and our weaknesses in different ways, and listen to the feedback as well as give feedback to create the cultures that, we believe are going to be the most successful and, supportive and nurturing, as well as we go along. So we do have a few questions from the audience. I'd like to start with, what are the most challenging aspects of first starting in a leadership position? Laura, maybe would you like to take that one?
So I would say establishing trust. I would say with your team members and earning their respect can be challenging, especially if you're new to an organization or the team, but just navigating relationships, and understanding that managing relationships with peers and superiors and direct reports requires diplomacy, communication skills, and emotional intelligence. So that empathy, and just, I would probably say delegating is a big one. So one of the most challenging things for me is I want to own everything and see it through. And sometimes they take on too much. So try to delegate some of those tasks and responsibilities while maintaining accountability.
That's really great advice. I think that, yes, many of us who are high achievers, who just want to get things done, sometimes may have a little bit of difficulty letting go and letting others, take the baton and have the responsibility for getting projects over the finish line. And, we're all working together to accomplish our goals. So, that's a good one, which I agree, as I've progressed in my career, I've gotten much more comfortable with. But in the beginning, definitely was a challenge.
It's a hard.
Another question think another question that's really important, right now we're probably all in workplaces that employ generations of people over the course of 4 decades, maybe even 5. What trends have we seen change the most when it comes to managing people? What do you think, Regina? Because you've been in some pretty different types of companies managing, lots of different generations of workers.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've seen a few trends over the last several years. I think the first that probably most of you have read about is actually in hiring, which is really looking beyond the traditional things that we put out there as the must-haves, like the specific degree and the specific space and the specific number of years doing a certain thing, and really looking at somebody holistically for their potential and their track record in different ways. And I love that. And I have to say, at first, it was a little bit of a struggle to think about it that way. But I think as we were talking about diversity and as we were talking about opportunity, really thinking about what has someone's path been and what is their likelihood of success. And that looks different for different people. So being a little bit more creative in how we interview and how we think about roles has been a big change that I've seen over the last probably decade. And then in managing people, I think it goes back to that being real and being vulnerable and not feeling like you always have to know the answer. And I think the youngest generation that's in the workforce right now, they kind of expect that. They don't want your BS. They don't care how many years you've been doing what you're doing. And if they think that you're kind of full of it, they're gonna let you know that, and they're not gonna respect you. So I think that authenticity is huge and only getting more important, and that you're not just gonna get respected because of a title or some letters or numbers after your name.
That's for sure. That is great. I guess one last question I will ask of each of you is, do you have a go-to networking group or maybe a newsletter or, something within your industry that's a go-to resource for you from a leadership perspective and, addressing a lot of the topics that we had today? I think that would be really helpful for people to know of some great resources that are available. Laura, you mentioned that you read a lot on your own about leadership topics. Is there anything that stands out that you would recommend?
I would say, so let me see, a few different books that I've read. So I'm trying to think what's over here. The Challenger is one of them that I've read. I will say more or less, I provide support. I look for support from women in our industry, just in general. I've got a women's network group that I meet with once a month, and there's 6 of us that we meet with regularly. And that's how we support each other. That's probably, I can read as many books as I want, but I would say just relying on other women in the industry and creating your own support group is probably the number one thing that I lean on for support.
Yeah, I agree. I have a group I call the HR Rebels, and it's HR professionals that our goal is to think differently, and they're people first. They're people first people. And that having that group to lean on when you have questions or sounding boards or things like that is really important. Also, for anyone out there who struggles with neurodiversity, I just started listening to a podcast called ADHD for Badass Women Leaders or something like that. I think that's what it's called. Sorry. ADHD for Smart Ass Women.
There you go.
And it's extremely powerful. And talk about being forgiving. It's forgiving yourself. It's a great book for anybody struggling with ADHD, or if you have somebody in your family struggling with it.
I think for me, just networking in general is so critical. And I think it's so easy for us to get sort of siloed in our space. And so I try to take every opportunity. As far as reading, it kind of runs the gamut from, the big players, SHRM, all the way down to sort of little local things. And it's the same thing with networking. I'm part of a local HR sort of best practices group, but I also try very hard to go to at least one HR conference every year where I can network in person, because you never know who you're going to sit next to. I feel like I get so much energy off of being in space with like-minded people and people who are struggling with the same things. And so if you're someone who hasn't really ventured out to something in person in a while, I highly encourage you, make a business case, pitch it, get out there, because I always come back fired up with new ideas and with new contacts.
Well, I think that's a perfect high note to end on, Regina. Thank you so much. I think we can all agree that, networking is so powerful, and, especially as women, the connections that we can make and the ways we can support each other, are really powerful as well, whether it's a virtual meeting or an in-person meeting, which I agree, having gone to events, over the past year, when people are still saying, this is the first event that I've been to in like a year, is really exciting. And so we are getting back to that, thankfully. So thank you everyone who stayed on with us for today's webinar. We really appreciate the questions that came in and your attention to all these important topics that we discussed. Thank you so much, Regina and Laura and Michelle. You've been wonderful panelists. Your experience and insights have been invaluable, and we really appreciate you at MP. So thank you so much.
Thanks,
everybody. Take care.
For the opportunity.
Thank you for putting this on.
Bye.
Bye all.